Greetings friends, you are on the Ruslan Belov channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine as of March 8, 2025. A huge number of events have occurred today, so let's get started. Before we begin, I sincerely ask you to subscribe to the channel. Your subscription helps the channel grow. Thank you to everyone who has subscribed. Let's begin with the Sudzha Salient. We will start with the Sudzha Salient, from where we are receiving the largest amount of information. Based on the reports we have received as of the morning of March 8th, we can conclude that the Russian Federation has launched a decisive offensive. It is possible that a major battle for the entire Sudzha Salient has begun, with the goal not only to break through the Ukrainian Armed Forces AFU defense, but to completely push Ukrainian forces out of the area. Before we discuss geolocations and details, I would like to read a few analytical reports and articles dedicated to Sudzha as of the morning of March 8th. Certain pro-Russian military experts report today that Ukrainian armed forces units concentrated in the Sudzha district number between 4,700 to 6,030 soldiers and are now encircled. They no longer have options to break out of this trap. Of course, they might attempt to break through the encirclement, but in that case, only 15 to 20% of Ukrainian soldiers have a chance of successfully completing this mission. The rest will most likely be eliminated if they attempt such a breakthrough. Additionally, reports indicate that isolated groups of AFU soldiers along the line of contact, acting independently and without reporting to Ukrainian command, Syrsky, have begun negotiations with Russian units. Negotiations on surrender. The negotiations suggest that Ukrainian forces are ready to completely surrender, as well as hand over military equipment, various NATO and French technologies, and whatever else they have in exchange for sparing their lives. Reports also indicate that out of the 6,300 soldiers currently in the Sudzha Salient, about 1,000 are ready to surrender today. Furthermore, 230 soldiers are in critical condition and urgently require medical assistance. From all this, we can conclude that there is an extremely high probability that the situation in the Sudzha Salient will be resolved much sooner than predicted by Western media. For example, today the newspaper Politico published an interesting article suggesting that over the next 2 weeks, Ukraine will complete its withdrawal from this area. However, given the current situation as of this morning, there is a very high probability that everything will be over much sooner. Decisive Russian assault. Since early morning, various reliable pro-Russian sources have been reporting that the Russian armed forces have launched a decisive assault. This is not just an attack somewhere near Malaya Loknya or Sumy Oblast. Strikes are now being directed toward the town of Sudzha itself. Some pro-Russian experts report that Russian forces are now moving decisively into the central part of Sudzha from the Cherkasskaya Konopelka, Fanseyevka, and Kurilovka areas. It is possible that during the day we will receive a large number of updates, geolocations, and footage. Perhaps by the time you are watching this video, there will already be enough visual confirmation proving the presence of Russian soldiers in Sudzha. In any case, we can see that combat operations are ongoing and that something significant is likely to happen soon. Ukrainian attempts to supply and evacuate troops today. Ukrainian sources have published surveillance footage showing that under the cover of night, Ukrainian units are still trying to bring supplies into Sudzha or evacuate the wounded. We can see that every few meters along the road of life, which Ukrainian forces must use daily, despite all the dangers and threats, there are destroyed vehicles. This is the clearest evidence that Ukrainian troops are now completely surrounded in Sudzha. Next, we continue with Malaya Loknya. Let me remind you that yesterday we received a significant amount of news from various sources, including official ones and geolocation data, indicating that during combat operations, the Russian army managed to take control of the settlements of Viktorovka and Nikolaevka, as well as raise a flag over the settlement of Staraya Sorochina. This morning, reports indicate that the Russian army has approached Malaya Loknya, and as of now, the village is surrounded from 3 sides. Additionally, information suggests that during the night between March 7th and 8th, a large portion of Ukrainian units in Malaya Loknya attempted to flee toward the settlement of Kazakya Loknya. At the moment, no geolocated footage or objective control images have been published to confirm this, but overall, This information aligns with the broader developments in the area. There is a very high probability that today, on March 8th, a substantial amount of geolocated evidence will emerge confirming Russian control over territories north of the current front line. Again, by the time you are watching this video, you might already have access to such footage. Moving toward the border between Kursk and Sumy regions. As you can see, the map has changed. Today, Ukrainian sources published surveillance footage, based on which significant territories have been marked as under Russian control, not only along the Kursk region border, but also including specific forest belts and strongholds within Sumy Oblast. This map adjustment is based on objective control footage released by the Ukrainian side. The footage shows Russian assault troops crossing fields toward the settlement of Basovka. Shortly before we started making this video, certain sources updated their maps, marking Basovka as under Russian armed forces control. Summary of the situation. To summarize, it is very likely that by the morning of March 8th, all territories within the marked front line will be under firm Russian control. Currently, objective control images primarily include satellite imagery displaying thermal anomalies, which suggest the directions of Russian strikes. At this moment, the distance to Highway N07 is minimal. While Russian forces may not yet have full physical control over it, they already exercise control through FPV drones and artillery strikes, with Ukrainian losses approaching 100%. Further expansion of Russian control reports indicate that Russian forces are expanding their control in the Kurilovka area and approaching another supply route, which is no longer operational as Russian troops are now physically present in the area. Additionally, newly released footage shows a destroyed pontoon bridge near the settlement of Gieva, which the Ukrainian forces previously used for supplying their southern units. Yesterday, pro-Ukrainian mapping services had already marked this sector in favor of Russian forces based on objective control footage. By the end of March 6th, Russian units were only approaching this road, but by the evening of March 7th and the morning of March 8th, there is little doubt that the area is now under full Russian control. What's next for the Russian army? The battle for the Sudzha Salient is nearing its logical conclusion. Naturally, this raises the question, what will the Russian army do next? Will Russian forces stop at the border? Or will they advance towards Sumy to create a buffer zone and prevent similar situations in the future? At this moment, it is difficult to say. Most likely, the outcome of the encirclement and destruction of Ukrainian forces in Sudzha will be the key factor influencing the Russian command's decision. If Russian losses remain minimal, then there is a very high probability that Russian forces will continue their advance. Pokrovskoye direction. Now, let's move toward the Pokrovskoye direction, which has also seen a surge in reports. Today, more and more sources confirm that Ukrainian forces have significantly expanded their control over the settlement of Shevchenko in recent days. Just yesterday, Shevchenko was almost 90% controlled by Russian forces, but the situation has changed. Shevchenko settlement, control shifts and Russian counter-offensive. Today, the majority of mapping services, including pro-Russian ones, report that the northern part of Shevchenko is fully under the control of the Ukrainian armed forces. Russian units were forced to retreat to the southern outskirts. Currently, the regrouping of Russian troops in the south has been completed, and, according to various pro-Russian sources, the Russian army is gradually resuming pressure on the northern and northeastern parts of Shevchenko to push out Ukrainian forces. The settlement of Shevchenko plays a key role in logistics and supply lines for Russian units in Udaknoye and Kotlina. Yesterday, reports suggested that due to poor logistics and ongoing battles over Peshenoy and Shevchenko, Russian forces were forced to abandon the settlement of Udaknoye. At least, this is indicated by data from neutral mapping services. Dnipro direction. Russian offensive gains momentum. Moving on to the Dnipro direction, where the Russian offensive is once again gaining momentum. Yesterday, after the Russian army took full control of Andreevka, the Russian Ministry of Defense reported that troops began advancing northwest from Andreevka. Over the past few days, they have significantly expanded their control, particularly toward the surrounding forest belts. As of March 8th, reports indicate that Russian forces have begun similar movements from Zaporozhye and Serebryannoye. Based on these developments, it is likely that in the near future, Russia will attempt to align the front line along Andreevka, then Petropavlovka and Slavianka. Further objectives include Yasenevo, Serebryanoye, and Zaporozhye, aiming to cut off this pocket of resistance. This is a critical operation, not only to stabilize the front line, but also to free up additional forces that can then advance westward toward Alexievka from the north and northwest. It appears that the final stage of battles in the Bogatyr sector is now underway. Conflicting reports from Constantinople. Now, moving toward Constantinople, where contradictory reports are emerging. Ukrainian sources provide one version of events, while Russian sources publish a completely opposite account. On March 6th, objective control footage indicated that the southern part of Constantinople was firmly under Russian control. However, yesterday, pro-Ukrainian and neutral mapping services reported that a Ukrainian counterattack had allowed them to regain control of the southern sector. As a result, Ukrainian forces managed to break the encirclement of their units in the central and northern parts of the settlement. By the morning of March 8th, new reports indicated that Russian units were completing the clearance of Constantinople. The Ukrainian de-blocking operation had ended, and the last remaining Ukrainian units were retreating to organize a defensive line around Bogatyr. There is also speculation that Ukrainian forces may soon abandon Rozliv as well, heading toward Bogatyr, as holding Rozliv after the fall of Constantinople would be nearly impossible. However, objective control footage presents a different picture. One such video shows a Ukrainian evacuation vehicle arriving in southern Constantinople, attempting to evacuate troops. Russian reconnaissance quickly detected and destroyed the vehicle. At present, pro-Russian cartographers estimate that approximately 80% of Constantinople is under Russian control, while the remaining 20%, specifically the western and northwestern parts, remain under Ukrainian control. There is a high probability that within the next 24 to 48 hours, Constantinople will be fully cleared, and the Russian Ministry of Defense will officially confirm its capture. Southern Donetsk front, stalemate after rapid advances, moving on to the southern Donetsk direction, where the front line has stabilized. At the end of February and early March, Russian forces rapidly advanced, securing control over Privolnaya Bolatskaya, Skudnaya. After this swift progress, Russian troops halted their advance. It is possible that Russian forces have now encountered Ukraine's next defensive line, and at the moment a systematic effort is underway to weaken and dismantle it. Ongoing battles. Fierce fighting is ongoing for the settlement of Dnipro Energia, which is currently being heavily bombarded. Shevchenko is also under intense attack, with FAB strikes and Sontsepyok thermobaric barrages hitting the area. Final thoughts. That's the latest battlefield update. Stay tuned and don't forget to subscribe for further reports.